Hello and welcome to the SCI Guys, the show where we talk about the crazy, weird and wonderful stories from the science world. I'm Corey and as always I'm joined by my co-host, the laughing Luke Cuthworth. This week we're talking about a mad millionaire and a suspicious submersible. But first, we have a wee review.
What's the wee review?
It's 5 stars. It says, solid pod. Love the way they treat the science as a discussion as opposed to objective truth. I feel like they really miss that out when we learn it in school. Also very funny. It's very nice. That's very kind. I've also got a question for everyone. If you're watching or listening, and if you're listening, by the way, get down to the YouTube comments and answer this question. The question is... What would you do with $250,000?
Invested in my retirement, because God knows the welfare state will not exist when I'm 70.
Well, look, that's a pretty good idea, but I've got a better idea for you. How would you like to go visit the Titanic?
No! I feel like that's a smart answer right now.
Seriously, look, the Titanic sank like less than 150 years ago. Have some respect, please.
My apologies.
So, what are we talking about today? Well, you know what we're talking about today. People went down in a submersible to have a look at the Titanic or pretend they were having a look at the Titanic, and it didn't go very well. Let's get into why that was. And why don't we start off with the Titanic, a tragedy that is actually kind of similar to this one. So I don't know if you know much about the Titanic, Luke. So it was a passenger liner. It sank 14th to 15th of April in 1912 on its maiden voyage. As we all know, we've all seen the film with Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet and I'm on the ship and and get me on the, all of that nonsense.
I've only actually ever seen half of that movie at a time.
Yeah, because you were in school and they showed you like a little chunk of it, and then you go to the next class and they show you the same chunk of it.
Yep.
And you watch the first 40 minutes of it again and again and again. Although to be fair, that's like under a third. That's a long movie, right? It's like 3 hours long.
Yeah, imagine you were watching a third of Avatar at a time.
I'm going to say this actually. To be fair, you could probably watch the Titanic a few times, like before the Titanic sank. By which I mean as in how long it took for the Titanic to sink. You could probably get a couple Titanic watching, a couple of Titanic viewings in there. Anyway, let's talk about the Titanic. So it was heading to New York City from Southampton. It sank, killed about 15,000 people. You know the story of the Titanic probably, and if you don't, go and watch the film or go and read about it, okay? It's not super important for this now. But what I do want to talk about is kind of how it sank. So initially, the bow started to sink, and then the stern began to rise out of the water. And so the middle was under a lot of strain, obviously, right? So the ship was sinking, basically. The sort of front was going... Wait, the front is the bow? I don't know ship terms. Anyway, the ship was sinking, one end going in, kind of like, whoa, no, we're going down. But because it's such a big ship and it's so heavy, right? It's snapped in half, basically, right? Yeah. It's like, you see that thing where Superman kind of catches an airplane or whatever, or he picks up a big thing. If that was to happen in real life, one, he'd die because, he's not real. But two, whatever he was lifting would just snap in half.
Okay.
Yes, because an object isn't necessarily able to support itself from one end like that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. That's really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So the ship split in two and sort of sank into separate pieces. So it was around 2 a.m. The propellers were visible above the water. So the stern must be the back.
Could be front wheel drive.
Good Lord. Okay, so the stern came up and then it snapped. Now, the captain didn't sound a general alarm. So some people were like not able to get off the ship because they literally did not know it was sinking until it was too late. And if you think about this, the front's going in, so the front is like water starting to seep in, and the back is coming up. So things are going to start sliding. It's going to be super dangerous, right? You're going to try and get to the lifeboats. As we know, there weren't enough lifeboats for every single person to get on them. I heard apparently that's because the idea is that another ship is supposed to come by and you go back and forth ferrying people between the two.
But that didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen. I really want to go into this because it's it's so poignant, and it makes so much sense if you relate it to what's happening now. So at 2:18 a.m., the lights on the Titanic went out, and then it broke in two. And apparently, people speculated afterwards that it took 6 minutes for the bow section, the bow half, the front half. Is it bow? Yeah, bow. To sink to the bottom. So that was traveling at 30 miles an hour through the water. And if you think about it, right, 30 miles an hour doesn't seem very fast if you think about a car, right? 30 miles an hour for something that size, a Titanic bloody ship, right? Crashing through the water. That's
pretty fast.
That's fast. And water is, I'm sure you know, Luke, thicker than air.
Yeah.
It's thicker than air, right? Yeah. I'm moving my hand through air. I'm like, woo, this is fine, right? Okay, have you ever held your hand out the window as you're driving in a car? It's like you get hit by the air, but like you can hold your hand and it's fine. It doesn't hurt, right? Have you ever tried to like hold?
Oh yeah, stick your hand in water when you're going along in a boat.
Yeah, and there's also obviously there's surface tension and stuff there to at play as well. But like, no, the water and air are like very much. Obviously, they're very much different kinds of things. But I feel like people tend not to think too much about how sort of thick and well, I mean, it's not terribly viscous, but how viscous, sticky, and just unrelenting water can be.
Yeah, I mean, imagine you're rowing in water. That's the resistance of the water is meaning that the rows work. Yeah. If you do that on air, you're not going to go anywhere. No. Even if you lube up your boat.
No, exactly. I mean, you need to have like massive fans before you can actually start doing anything like that. So, if we continue on, as I said, about 218, it split in two. 220, apparently, the stern also started to go down, like beneath the water. And then it says here that apparently that section, the stern section, imploded because there was still air inside it. If you think about it, right? The bow was going down, so water was filling that up more slowly, right? Then the stern snaps off the bow because it can't, the weight of it can't be supported by the midsection, snaps off, hits the water, starts sinking, but it's going to be sinking kind of, I guess, a little bit more quickly. There's still going to be air trapped inside, and it's going to be sinking in a slightly different way, right? And if there's air trapped inside and you're heading down to the bottom, the water pressure on the outside, as we've been saying, water is like thicker, it's heavier than air, right?
And it doesn't compress very well either.
Water does not like to compress. No. It's not. It doesn't like that. I mean, if you think about it, people say that it's. I mean, do you know when you jump off of a diving board, and this isn't exactly the same thing, but when you jump off of a diving board and you hit water, if you're not like diving properly, or if you do like a belly flop, you can come off like all red.
Oh yeah.
Water can hurt. Okay, water is a very, very dangerous thing, not just for drowning, but like as its physical properties alone. So the pressure there caused that part of the ship apparently to implode as it was sinking. An implosion is kind of like the opposite of an explosion. Explosion being stuff going out really fast. So essentially a pressure wave kind of going out, expanding. And an implosion is the opposite of that, is pressure sort of caving something in. A lot of inward pressure, really sort of quickly, a really sort of quick inward pressure wave, if that makes sense. Yeah? Okay, so that's kind of what happened there, and as the ship sank, people who were on the ship, passengers and crew, were trying to get off. If you didn't get onto a lifeboat, you were going in the water, right? Now, this is the middle of the Atlantic. It's cold. It's cold as all hell. I mean, it hit an iceberg, okay? It's cold enough for an iceberg. It's bloody freezing. Almost, right? So they're in the water, and now, if you're in really cold water, and you don't get out and get dry and get warmed, you're probably going to die. If you're in cold water for too long, literally you will just die of exposure. Like again, the world is not a very safe place when it comes to like nature, right? Nature can be, let's say, hostile. I wouldn't even, hostile is not necessarily the best word, but like, we live very comfortable lives. It's kind of difficult to just die randomly from interacting with our cultivated environments. But in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, so easy. So, space and like the sea are kind of the same in that we've not explored all of the oceans of the world, and we've not explored all of space. And there's a reason that when you watch films, space stuff is basically just sea stuff, right? It's just, they just transliterate it to space, because in both you're surrounded by death.
Yep.
Everywhere. If you fall off of the thing that you're on, you are dead. Don't even, like, we have no idea what's there either. Like, they're very similar conceptually, right? So all these people were in the water. Obviously, some people were in lifeboats, but the people in lifeboats, having seen, the Titanic go down and see people in the water, trying to survive, they did the absolute right thing, and they went back and picked up some of the survivors. The thing that they did wrong, though, is that they didn't want to be swamped, and so they waited a bit before going back to pick up the survivors, and so a ton of people died just in the water because the lifeboats were like, oh, well, we might die if we go and they try and all get on, so let's wait a little bit and then we go and then we help them out after that. Yeah, so people died of exposure. Also, bear in mind, if you jump off the ship and you're near the ship when it goes down, you're dead too. Why do you think that might be?
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Okay, so think of it this way, right? If the ship is sort of my fist here, right?
Yeah.
For people listening, I'm holding my fist up in front of me.
Oh, do you mean you're going to get crushed by the ship?
No, not even crushed. If you're near where the ship is as the ship is going underwater.
Oh, you're going to get sucked down?
Yeah, right? Because the ship displaces the water, and then the water rushes in to replace that, and you get sucked in and under with it. Yeah. This is like the kind of physics where it's like, this ship is big. It's bigger than stuff we usually have to deal with. I mean, it's the same principles, really, right? But it's bigger than the stuff that we'd usually have to conceptualize and deal with. And so I feel like people don't necessarily think about this sort of stuff. Like, I remember learning this in school and being like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. And also that's terrifying. You can jump off the ship and try and swim away, but if it goes under, like properly under, whilst you're like still too nearby, you're going under with it. Like, it's just going to drag you down under with it. So that's what happened to some people, obviously. Now, in total, 1,500 people died. 700 people of those were from the crew. Third class had the most fatalities outside of the crew. So of the passengers, third class had the most losses. It was about 710 of 710 people. Only 174 of them survived. So that means that 536 people died from third class, most of them, which is insane. Apparently, people were saying that some of those passengers who were in the sort of really cheap places weren't even allowed to board boats. That's not true, apparently. But as I said, there wasn't a general alarm, so people who were in third class, some of them didn't even know what was going on until they were, too late to get out. So what we can see here is that, when it comes to the Titanic, the people who really suffered the most were the working class people, the people who were literally working on the Titanic, and the people who were in third class, the cheapest sort of tickets to get onto the ship. Now that's kind of makes you think about what's happening now. Back then, they were willing to let the poorer people die, so as to prioritize the lives of the rich. Now, the Titanic is now sitting at the bottom of the Atlantic, about 4,000 meters below the surface. It's down there. I mean, and it's become sort of part of the ecosystem. I mean, if you see it, it looks like this really creepy sort of, not exactly coral reef, but you know what I mean? Like a really creepy, old shipwreck, which is what it is.
It is a really creepy old shipwreck.
And so we cut to now, basically. So in June 2023, June 18th, OceanGate, which, brilliant name, because, hey, gate, we put gate on the end of scandals. If you want to avoid being labeled, your business name being branded as a scandal, just put gate on the end. What are they going to say? OceanGate gate?
So all the stuff we're seeing in the press that's bad about this thing is, it's OceanGate gate. Sorry, you already made the joke. I was planning it, and then I realised you'd already said it.
Yes. Don't worry.
God damn it, you!
Yeah, so OceanGate sent out the Titan, which... Can we just talk about the fact that the Titanic... Titanic, meaning Titan-like, right? Like ick, that ick suffix.
Yeah.
It's like a Titan. The Titan is this tiny 5-person submersible that OceanGate was sending down to the Titanic. It's tiny.
It's an absolute Titan.
It's just, it's a bit of a... Anyway, so Do you know anything about what happened with this whole sort of trip of the Titan down to sort of see the Titanic?
So I know that is it 1 hour 45 or 45 minutes or something like that? They lost communication, and so there's meant to be some way of them communicating back to like the mothership sort of thing, because they were launched off of another ship that sort of waited for them. Never to return. Spoilers. And for a while, it basically went down. And for a while, there was a bunch of knocking, or what we thought was knocking, which was supposedly like there was one person on the ship that was like quite well trained in diving, and they thought maybe he knew the sort of rescue procedure was knock 3 times on the hour every hour, or on the hour every hour and every half an hour, something along those lines. But that turned out to not be the case. And as far as we understand it, there was some kind of catastrophic implosion of the ship's side, and they found a bunch of leftover ship.
Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah. So let's go back to sort of the start of this, just before the 18th. I mean, this wasn't the first. This wasn't the first time that they'd done trips like these. Let's actually go a bit farther back before that. So I kind of OceanGate were basically marketing themselves as, we're going to do like these sort of consumer trips to the Titanic, basically kind of like Richard Branson's space trips, but with the Titanic. And I was relating space to, the ocean before. This is basically the same thing, except I would say probably way more dangerous, in that going to space in the way that, billionaires have been going to space is a glorified plane ride. So, and as we know, air travel is fairly safe. Now, going under the sea, as I said, is insanely scary and dangerous, right? I mean, like, you have basically the opposite of what you've got with space, right? When you're in, like, sort of, let's say, deep space, right? You're basically in a vacuum, right? Yeah. And that means that anything that's inside of sort of your ship is going to be pushing on the walls, pushing out on the walls, and there's nothing on the outside to be pushing in. So that means that your walls need to be able to be strong enough to not blow apart from whatever is pushing them on the inside, which would be air, right? And in the ocean, it's kind of the opposite situation. You've got air on the inside, and the air pressure on the inside is going to be much less than the water pressure on the outside. We'll get more into that in a bit. But essentially, they were marketing themselves as, we're going to send people to see the Titanic. They had a journalist. Did you hear about this journalist that went to sort of interview and did a story about the Titan last year? I think maybe. No, I didn't. I think it was 6 months ago.
I did see that there was some kind of TV presenter, documentary person wanting to go on it, and the TV company basically inspected the ship and went, nope. Not safe, and then they cancelled it.
So that's what I'm talking about. So this was when they lost contact with the ship for a few hours, and they were not letting anyone tweet about it at all whilst it was happening. Like, they just lost contact. Yeah. Now, as we'll find out, losing contact with the submersible was clearly something that happened, often enough for it to not be a huge concern, which that ship can't guide itself. The submersible can't guide itself. It needs to be guided by, sort of like a ship above it. Like, they know where they don't have like a sort of locator or anything.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a really bod job, right? We'll go into it more specifically. So yeah, David Pogue, who's a journalist, he was on the Titan in 2022 to go and look at the Titanic. And he pointed out that it didn't have an emergency locator beacon. And apparently, I say apparently, this did happen, as we've been saying, the ship that stays on the surface to kind of like keep in contact and, keep an eye on everything, they lost contact with them for about 5 hours. And they could still text the sub, but they didn't know where it was. And they were able to send messages, but they had no idea where it was, which in the middle of the ocean is not good, because bear in mind as well, with this submersible, there's no let's say you get lost, right? You'd think, okay, well, we'll just rise up to the surface and we'll open the doors, and at least we'll have air.
You can't do that.
We can shoot up a flare or whatever. No, you can't do that. The doors are bolted from the outside.
Yeah.
So you can only be let out by the people on the surface.
Yeah,
so they need to know where you are.
Because that's the worst thing. Because for a while they were going, okay, what's happened to this thing? Maybe it's at the bottom. Maybe it's like they've dropped their ballast, which is like their weight to keep them down, and they're bobbing along. And I was like, okay, if that's happened, fine. And then I read, even if they've done that, if they're on the surface, if they're inches away from air, they can't flip and open the thing.
Yeah.
And it's designed to withstand 3,000 meters of water, so there's no way they can kick the door in.
Yeah, no.
They're stuck with
ridiculous.
air there.
That's the most recent one. I'm still talking about like months and months ago in 2022. In 2022, when they lost contact with the Titan for about 5 hours, and the journalist was on the submersible, they shut off the internet to stop them from tweeting. Yeah, so they couldn't tweet or post anything about it being lost. And apparently it was quite quiet and very tense. Again, I cannot believe that they would just shut off the internet to stop that kind of thing. It's just so shady. And then someone else who had been on 4 different dives with this submersible, with the Titan, said that it lost contact on all of the dives that he did with it. And this is a quote from Mike Reese, or Mike Rice, depending on how you pronounce his name. That seems to be just something baked into the system. Apparently it took 3 hours to locate the Titanic during one dive, despite landing only about 460 meters from it. So yeah, if we're thinking about this, if we're looking at it, even from last year when they were starting this sort of stuff out, it didn't look too safe. Let's say there were some clear problems there. I mean, why don't we instead talk about sort of like all of the sort of limitations of this, all of the sort of problems, before we actually talk about what exactly happened. Ding-a-ling-ling, is that the ad bell?
I hope so. We don't have any other bells in this room.
Well, I'll tell you what we don't have in this room, Luke. We don't have people who have subscribed to SCI Guys on YouTube and followed us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
I actually have done all those things.
I have too. But why don't we tell people about why specifically that is a very cool and interesting thing for them to do?
Well, we want to be everywhere with you all the time. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, we want to be there with you. If you're on Spotify, we want to be there with you. And if you're on YouTube, we want to be there with you. And you probably want us to be there with you too.
Even if you prefer to listen on Spotify and don't really watch us on YouTube all that much, it really helps if you subscribe on every single platform, because it gets us in front of more people, which means it makes it easier to make this show, which you love, right? You love it. You love us, right?
Give me love. Validate my soul.
Subscribe to SCI Guys on YouTube and follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify right now.
Heal the deep, deep chasm in my heart.
Let's get back to the show. So the Titan, as I've said, was a submersible. It was about 6.7 meters long, about 2.5 meters tall, and I think about 2.8 meters wide. It could fit 5 people, and it could reach a speed of 5.6 kilometers an hour, max speed, which is about 3 knots. It could last 96 hours with 5 people. So 96 hours worth of air in that little box there. And it could have 5 people. So that was apparently the crew is 1 pilot, 1 technical expert, and 3 mission specialists.
That's such a wanky name.
Yep.
Imagine if it was it'd be like if you it sounds like something they call you on a Disney ride.
I was going to say like getting
Mission
on a roller coaster.
specialist.
It's like you go to a Star Wars. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, and so it was made of carbon fiber. Now, people have been asking about the sort of carbon fiber. I asked for some questions from, the SCI Guys audience. Actually, it was on my Twitter, so it could have been anyone. So the hull was carbon fiber. Now, usually, these kinds of subs are made from metals. Usually it's sort of like titanium, like really strong bloody metals. Now, the issue with that is you want it to be neutrally buoyant, right? You want it to be able. Do you know what neutrally buoyant is?
Does it mean that if you put it in the water, it stays in the same place, doesn't sink, and doesn't float up?
Exactly. So negative buoyancy is when you sink. I guess buoyancy, sort of positive buoyancy, is going up. And if you just sort of remain in balance where you are, that is neutrally buoyant. Yeah, exactly. Spot on. Now, if you want it to be neutrally buoyant, right? You want it to be able to just kind of float where it is, so that you can just have your propellers, your propulsion sort of push you wherever you're going. Again, a lot like space, weirdly, right? There are different concerns. It's not exactly one-to-one, but you can see where people are sort of bringing these connections in between the sea and the sky, essentially. Now, the hulls that have metal, right, like this sort of really strong titanium, that's obviously quite dense, and you don't really get neutral buoyancy at certain depths. So what you need to do is have this foam on the outside that's sort of really, really, it's really expensive. You clad the outside in that, and that sort of gives you that neutral buoyancy. So the Titan was made of carbon fiber. The reason for that being that carbon fiber is naturally buoyant. You don't need to pay for that expensive foam. So, it's a really good way to cut costs.
When your clients are billionaires.
Yeah, well, I mean, over and over and over, when you just look into this, all you can see is just cut corners. And if I'm being perfectly honest, if I'm going in a little tin can or a little carbon can down to the bottom of the bloody ocean, I know it's not the bottom of the ocean, by the way. I know it was only a few thousand meters, and actually Challenger's Deep is the deepest point of the ocean. Okay, we did an entire episode on it called Into Deep. You can go and watch that. That was an oldie, but it's a goodie. So I should actually say that, by the way. In this episode, we're not going to be talking too much about the different sort of depths of the ocean and all of those sorts of things, because we did cover that in depth in a previous episode. You can click somewhere and you can go and see that. So yeah, they had a carbon fiber epoxy composite hull. It had 6-inch thick walls, which was, I think they sort of figured out it needed to be maybe 4.5-ish inches, and so they rounded it up to 5-6 inches. So it was thicker than the sort of like, I guess safe minimum. Yeah. So now you might be wondering whether other submersibles have used carbon fiber. One of the a few of the questions actually were based around that. Some people were asking, I heard this was the first carbon fiber submersible. That's not actually true. There has been, to my knowledge, at least one other submersible that would go to sort of comparable depths with a carbon fiber hull. The issue is that this carbon fiber hull, the first submersible with a carbon fiber hull was the Deep Flight Challenger. Now you may think that that's James Cameron's one. It isn't. It's not James Cameron's one. It's a one-person submersible. It was Steve Fawcett commissioned it in about 2000. Then he died in, I think it was a flight accident or some kind of accident, some kind of tragic accident in 2007. Yeah, a light aircraft crash. And so the Challenger was then sold, but it wasn't ever actually fully tested, or it was tested, but it was never fully used to my knowledge again for a deep sea dive. Basically they tested it at high pressure, and it was actually okay. There was one issue. I think they found one crack, but that was from a manufacturing issue. So they did some more tests, and this was Virgin Oceanic, right? So Richard Branson was planning to do deep sea. He's going to send people to space for money, and he's going to send people to the bottom of the ocean for money, okay? This is sending people to places that are just death everywhere for money. I don't know. Just take a trip to Australia. This is basically the same thing, okay? Just go there. Walk around, you see a stonefish, don't step on it, you might die. It's one of my biggest fears.
Does Richard Branson offer that as Virgin Holidays?
So Virgin Oceanic, yeah, they tested it. They tested the Deep Flight Challenger, and they basically said it's only going to be useful for one dive. A single-use submersible isn't really great if you're trying to build a commercial industry, right? Especially when it's expensive. And now the reason that it's only suitable for one dive is that you don't just send it down and it comes back up and it's fine, right? It's under constant pressure. And this is what I need to get across. I mean, I don't know if you've ever swum to the bottom of a sort of deep swimming pool, but whenever I've done that, you can feel.
Really?
I mean, at least as a kid, I could feel what felt like a bit of a difference in pressure. Had very sensitive ears at the time, though. I think I'd burst them on the plane. Who knows? But I mean, if you really I feel like you can feel the change in pressure when you go deep enough. I mean, the change in pressure if you're on an airplane, right? You can. I mean, even though they try and keep the cabin pressure kind of sort of constant, there is still a change in pressure there, which is why your ears pop. Now it's a similar thing, but in reverse with this submersible. When they're down there, they're basically just stopping themselves from being crushed on all sides by water at all times. If you think about it as well, right? This isn't exactly how it is, I guess, but it's probably the easiest way to think about it. If you think about the sort of submersible, right? whatever shape it is. Let's say it's circular on the top. It's like a circular top, right? You then have a cylinder of water, whatever the surface area of the top of your thing is. You've got water, a column of that, thousands of meters,
kilometers up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's weird to think about because you don't automatically intuit that, but we have that that's what our air pressure is the kilometers of air above us pressing down on us due to gravity, which is pretty weird actually to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. And air pressure isn't very much. Do you know what air pressure is? And air pressure is at sort of sea level.
1 Pascal. Or 1 atmospheric pressure, sorry.
It's 1 atmospheric pressure. Oh, it's not 1 Pascal. No, it's very much not 1 Pascal. It's over 100,000 pascals.
That's what a rounding error, whatever.
Yeah, that's close enough. It's 1 atmospheric pressure,
yes.
which is why we call it that.
Yes.
But about 100,000 pascals. Now, yeah, obviously water pressure is much, much more than that, again, because water is denser. Anyway, so that was why they sort of determined this carbon fiber hull. It's only suitable for one journey, and then after that, it doesn't seem to be safe. So Virgin Oceanic scrapped. They just basically were like, okay, well, this isn't useful. We can't do. We're going to do 5 different dives, and they're like, well, we can only get 1. We'll shelve this for now, right? So that was the first carbon fiber hull for a submersible, and Virgin Oceanic, they got it tested properly, and they found out, okay, this isn't suitable for multiple dives, so we're going to leave it. That's not the same hull necessarily that the Titan had, but I'm giving you an idea here of carbon fiber hulls for these. There's a reason that they're not super commonplace, despite the fact that carbon fiber has been around for long enough for it to be, a thought there. They tend to be like a very sturdy, strong metal with foam to make it neutrally buoyant. So let's get into some more of the limitations. We've already spoken about the fact that there's no location system on board. We've spoken about the fact that you get locked in, bolted in to the submersible. On top of that, there's no way for the ship to be controlled by the support ship.
Yeah, why is that, Corey?
So the CEO, Stockton Rush, and this is hearsay, I don't know, apparently didn't like that they could take control away from him when he was driving his little submersible, and so he's like, "Nah, I don't want that to happen."
You say driving. What was he driving it with?
He's driving with a gaming controller,
like a PlayStation,
a PlayStation controller from Amazon. Yeah, a Bluetooth one. Yeah, a Bluetooth controller.
There's nothing inherently wrong with it.
There's nothing wrong with that. No,
it's just a controller like any other, but.
It's again
doesn't inspire confidence.
It's a cost-cutting measure, which seems odd to me, right?
Yeah.
Surely it can't be that much to. I mean, if you don't need to have a sort of bespoke controller, then I guess don't have a bespoke controller. But just a Bluetooth controller off of
or a keyboard.
It just seems so.
Or
odd.
like one of those sticks that you get to play Microsoft Flight Simulator.
Right.
It just inspires a bit more confidence. I know this is silly and like a little point, but like. Seeing him on the BBC News homepage when they were like, this is how the ship worked, and he was giving a tour of it, and it was like, it's controlled with this little PlayStation controller. I was like, oh, okay, this ship is definitely not okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's some of it. It could send text messages to the ship. It wasn't great, right?
Yeah.
It didn't have all the safety features that you sort of want it to have. Although I can't tell you sort of exactly all the problems with it because they never had it sort of, I guess, officially tested. The Marine Technology Society's Committee on Manned Underwater Vehicles, they wrote a letter and they didn't send it, basically saying, look, this submersible you've got, the Titan, we're worried about it, okay? The way it's designed doesn't seem super safe. Like, there are some problems, there are some obvious flaws. You should get it certified, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to get it sort of, it's called classed, basically taking it to a ship classification sort of society and getting it certified. And they just didn't do that. Basically, I mean, when they were marketing it, apparently, they said it would meet or exceed the standards of DNV, which doesn't make any sense because they were never going to have it tested by DNV. But this, the chair of the committee spoke to the CEO, and it says here, a frank conversation. So it was very much like, hey, there are problems, don't do this. In 2018, so 5 years ago, or 5 years before, the tragedy that happened. Apparently, Rush said that they agreed to disagree, and there was a blog post in 2019 explaining why it wasn't classed. And as a quote here, it says, "The vast majority of marine and aviation accidents are a result of operator error, not mechanical failure," which is okay, sure. But also, were they not classed? So maybe that's the reason that there's no mechanical failure. It's because we check that.
We check them, and the ones that don't pass. Yes, it's what's it called? Selection bias?
Yeah. It's like, oh man, it's weird. Like the only plane, like the weakest point of our planes must be this. This is where they're all being shot. No, it's because when the planes are shot in the other places, they go down. They don't come back.
The majority of surgeons make errors because they're hungover, not because they don't have degrees.
So I don't need a degree to be a surgeon,
I don't need a degree to be a surgeon.
Oh my lord! Oh good lord! It's baffling, right? And we could dig deeper and deeper and deeper into all of the problems with this, and we will. So,
was there also as far as I remember, there was a person who used to work for OceanGate? Are we getting there?
Yeah. So there were employees that basically brought up issues. They were saying, "Hey, we've got concerns. This isn't going to work." People quit and left. Are you talking about someone in particular?
So there was someone who claimed to work for OceanGate in the past, who said there were problems with the ship, who wrote a report about it, and then was fired.
Every single story about this is just why would you get on?
Yeah, that's suspicious.
But yeah, let's continue on. So they didn't. They didn't really test it properly. They said that they had partnerships with NASA, Boeing, a bunch of other people. Boeing came out after it sort of disappeared, and they said they were not a partner on the Titan and did not design or build it. Yeah, and NASA apparently they said that they had an agreement with OceanGate. It says here that NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center had a Space Act agreement with OceanGate, but did not conduct testing and manufacturing via its workforce or facilities. And, as I said, the CEO was going about being like, oh, we got partnerships with these guys and those guys and those guys. And afterwards, they're all like, hey, no, which makes sense because this tragedy happened and you've got blood in your hands if, you
got to distance yourself.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, and goodness me, and we mentioned Pogue earlier. He was the journalist. That went on it when it, lost contact for 5 hours and was told you can't tweet. They turned off the internet and everything. Apparently, he said that it was a MacGyvery, jerry-rigged-ness. Basically, the design was like kind of like, oh, we'll bodge it. We'll get that in there. Okay, well we can use a Bluetooth controller or whatever, like a little controller we got off of that, like, a PlayStation controller kind of thing or whatever. Basically not thinking, how can we make this the safest possible thing, which is what you should do if you're making people pay to go on it. But more sort of being like, how can we cut corners and keep the costs down? It was really just not great. So David Lockbridge, who was the director of marine operations for OceanGate, apparently inspected it, and he that was it. Yeah. Oh, this is what you were talking about, the quality control report. Yeah. He filed it. He said it was. He said that no non-destructive testing of the carbon fiber hull had taken place to check for voids and delaminating, which could compromise the hull's strength. Apparently, the OceanGate was going to rely on real-time acoustic monitoring system, which apparently wouldn't give anyone enough time to know about a failure before something bad happened. Basically, they were like, "Hey, look, we're not going to do this kind of like testing on it, but we've got this system in it to warn of any issues, and so it'll be fine."
Does that mean like listening for creaks?
I assume so. Yeah.
Like it's creaking, but you're 3 kilometers under the sea. What are you going to do about the creaking?
Yeah. Well, exactly. Right. So what you can do is kind of like drop all the heavy. There's a bunch of heavy stuff to make it sink. You can drop all that, and it will. Yeah. But again,
might be too late.
Yes, and I will get to this in a bit. But like, I just what people again I mean, these people do understand. These people should have known. But what people don't seem to understand about this is that it's not like springing a leak in a boat. Okay, we'll get into why that is later, but it's very much not like springing a leak in a boat. Lots of there's so many issues against this, right? OceanGate apparently sued Lockridge. This is the guy you're talking about. He was fired. He in a meeting he was saying, "Hey, look, I'm not okay with this. You need to have a look at the hull properly to test it, to check it for any problems or faults. And I'm just not going to let people, I'm not going to let people on this to test it until you've done that." So he got fired and then sued. And apparently he was accused of improperly sharing proprietary trade secrets and fraudulently manufacturing a reason to dismiss him.
Which they later settled, by the way.
Yeah, settled in November 2018.
Yes.
Yeah. Every single thing about this is just, if you look at, and there were stories about this out before. I've been finding stories from 2017 and 2018, 2019 about carbon fiber hulls and all of this sort of stuff. If I was going on a thing like this, I would want to look into it.
Oh, yes. I mean, there was a television production company who were, I think in the UK, who were looking to do a dive in this thing. And they went away and a television production company, had a look at this thing and went, no.
Yeah.
We're not going to, that's not safe, and didn't do it. And that's a television production company. I mean, obviously, presumably they hired someone to have a look. Yeah. It's not just some TV,
no, absolutely. Yeah,
TV
you hire
dude
in,
being what's this thing? This doesn't look safe.
Being fair though, I feel like a TV dude could also just look at that and be like, nah, mate, nah.
Yeah.
I mean, James Cameron we'll talk about why James Cameron was kind of involved in all the talks about this in a bit. But James Cameron was saying, yeah, this is a bad idea, sort of from the start.
He's going to know.
He knows.
He went even deeper.
He went the deepest anyone ever did go. He broke a record.
Or can go.
Yes.
Maybe.
Literally. He knows what he's talking about. But I'll say that now, right? So if you see James Cameron being spoken about or being interviewed for this, it's not just because he directed Titanic. No, but people might think that.
No, but how amazing that he's involved with the Titanic twice.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, it makes sense though. I think his whole thing, he's really interested in exploring.
Yeah.
He's a director and explorer. He truly had a submersible a submersible built so he could go down as deep as anyone had ever gone, and he collected samples and he took pictures and he genuinely aided our understanding of this. These guys were just going to go look at the Titanic on a screen for money.
Yeah, so talk about that. So, because one thing I saw, whether or not it's true, I have no idea, is that the front of the Titan has got this little porthole, right? Like a little window that you can look out of. Not only, I mean, you were talking to me off pod that this thing you couldn't really see out of it.
Yeah, so...
And I also separately read somewhere that it wasn't actually rated to go that low. It was rated to go 1,800 meters.
Okay, so there's a few things there. I mean, the porthole, I think, it wasn't a viewing porthole. Now, if you want to view stuff below the surface, that deep, light doesn't penetrate that deep. I mean, it's really dark. It's really, really dark down there. So you need lots of lights to be able to see anything. It wasn't fitted with them so that you could look at a porthole and see that. As well, think about it. A porthole is a weak point, right?
Yeah.
You wanna have as few of those as possible, right? Because that's a weak point that could collapse inwards, right? So they didn't have that. What they were doing was looking at it on a screen. So they had basically a camera, and they were inside this thing with no real view outside. And they were looking at stuff on a screen. So it's basically the same as being in one of those fake roller coaster things that, it's a 4D experience or whatever it is. So if we continue on, there's even more more issues with this. Apparently they tested Titan without a crew to 4,000 meters in 2018 to make sure that the design was okay, and then apparently they sent a crew of 4 by going to 3,760 feet in April 2019. So Rush went solo down to 4,000 meters. He was the second person to do that after James Cameron went down way deeper. James Cameron went, I think, 11,000-ish meters, or maybe he went down in the Mariana Trench. He went as pretty much as close to Challenger deep as anyone's gonna get. So they'd completed all of their testing by 2020, and apparently the hull was starting to show some signs of basically wear and tear, right? it was then they were then like, okay, well, it can't go to 4,000 anymore. Let's keep it at 3,000. And they then sort of like repaired or replaced different parts of it. A different company repaired and replaced the hull before they did their first trips to the Titanic. So apparently again, it says apparently the Boeing owned the carbon fiber materials, like that's where they got the carbon fiber, but OceanGate got them at a discount because they were past their shelf life. Mm-hmm.
Oh god!
Boeing said that they don't have any record that they sold anything to OceanGate or Stockton Rush himself. So that's kind of all of the background. I mean, as you can see, what we've got here is a submersible that is basically been put through the ringer. Already, we know that carbon fiber submersibles, like, you know, that the hull just, it's not super safe for multiple trips. And they replaced and repaired it, sure, but then they sent it down, you know, to the Titanic a number of times. And so we come to the 16th of June. So 16th of June 2023, they left Newfoundland, and they were on the Polar Prince, which was a ship, you know, that was taking them out there. They got there on the 17th of June, where they were going to like go diving in the submersible, obviously. Hamish Harding apparently posted on Facebook, due to the worst winter in Newfoundland in 40 years, this mission is likely to be the first and only crewed mission to the Titanic in 2023. A weather window has just opened up and we're going to attempt a dive tomorrow. It was supposed to start around 4 a.m., 8 a.m., I think our time. I don't know. 4 a.m., whatever time it is in the middle of the bloody ocean or whatever. I don't know. And then they went down the dive. They started the dive on the 18th of June at 9:30 a.m. Newfoundland Daylight Time. And for an hour and a half, they were going all as normal. Everything was fine. They were communicating every 15 minutes. But then after at 11:15 a.m., communication stopped. No more communication. Again, at this point, the people, you know, on the ship were probably like, well, this happens all the time, whatever, it should be fine. So they were like, we'll just leave it. So people were asking, why did they not tell anyone about this until like hours later? Well, it's because this happened all the time. They were waiting until they were expected to resurface. That was at 4:30. When that didn't happen, they told the Coast Guard, and they still had like 96 hours of air, as we've spoken about. But that was from when it set out, which meant that on the 22nd of June 2023, that would be when the air ran out. So they started the trip on the 18th of June, and by the 22nd, if they were still in it, even if they were at the surface, they'd be dead.
So that was Monday to Thursday.
Yeah, Monday to Thursday
in the UK at least.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was all going. They told the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard, now what they do is they will scramble to protect, like, basically save anyone that's having trouble in the water. Like, there's an international sort of agreement, right, that it doesn't really matter whose ship it is in sort of international waters. Like, you go and help. The nearest ships go and help. So on top of that, you may have heard that the Navy detected something. They detected a sound that essentially would indicate an explosion or an implosion. That was a few hours after the Titan submerged, essentially, right? So the Navy found out about this. They had a look at it. They sent that information to the Coast Guard. So, I mean, they knew, and also James Cameron apparently found out about this pretty early on. You know, amongst the sort of deep sea diving community, yes, this sort of spread around. So James Cameron, from the start, was like, these guys are dead. This is pretty sad, and their families are worrying, and OceanGate isn't saying anything, and no one's saying, coming out and saying, hey, we're looking for wreckage. We're not looking for people. So that's kind of what happened there, right? That was up until the point till they basically went down and found out that it had in fact imploded. So I kind of want to talk about that, because that seems to be where I think most people don't understand exactly what's going on. Now, if we think about everything that we've been speaking about up until then, up until now rather, we know that there's a lot of pressure on the outside of this sort of vehicle, of the submersible, pushing in, right? Basically, all of that water is think about it like holding a bottle of like a water bottle, right? Like a plastic water bottle. Squeeze all the water out, it's just air on the inside, right? Now, if you take your hands and you try and cover the entire water bottle and you just try and squeeze it, right? That's what's going on there. Now, if you've got a sturdy bottle, like if you've say got a metal bottle, you're going to struggle to squeeze that in. If you've got a plastic bottle, you can just crush it immediately, right? Now, what's going to happen is if there's a fault, right? Then the integrity is compromised. The ship can't keep all of that stuff out. It's just going to go in. It's going to crush in very, very quickly. So, I mean, if we think about sort of the timings of this, human sort of reaction times are in the sort of hundreds of milliseconds, as far as I'm aware, but sort of hundreds roughly.
So if something happens in 200 milliseconds, you think it happened instantly?
Yeah. So something instant is still a few hundred milliseconds. Yeah. Or 100 to 200. Yeah, around that range, right? Now, this implosion happened like in a millisecond. Or milliseconds, very quickly.
Oh my god!
No, exactly. So people have been asking, hey, so how did this work? Like, did they know anything was going on? Did they feel anything? Would they have had like headaches or anything? Well, it's kind of unlikely, right? What would have happened is they would have it would have just happened instantly. And again, this isn't just like water rushing in. I feel people are going to be thinking about this as a sinking ship. It's not a sinking ship, okay? Because a sinking ship is near the surface and water's being pushed in, as the thing's going down. So you see water rushing in like that really quickly. No, there's so much more pressure here. At 3,000 meters, however deep they were, the pressure is enormous. I mean, I could give you numbers, but it's not really gonna compute in your head.
It's
right?
like hundreds of atmospheres, isn't it?
Yeah, like at 12,500 feet, it's more than 4,400 psi. Basically, if there's any sort of imperfection there, and the integrity is broken, implosion. Everything just the water's constantly pushing against the hull, right? And if the hull just has a slight little break, boom. Yeah. It's like if you, how do I put this? It's almost as though think about holding sort of matchsticks between your hands and you're really pushing pushing in, right? Like a matchstick between your hands, you're pushing it in. If you've got it perfectly level, let's say a pencil. For anyone watching, for anyone listening, just imagine me holding a pencil between both my hands, or go and watch on YouTube. So you've got this pencil, right? Now look, if you were to sort of I'm pushing this quite hard. If you were to tap this pencil, tap it in my hands, if you oh my gosh, right? And immediately my hands come together, right? Yeah. Now this is a sharpish pencil. It's really stabbing my hand, so I didn't want to press too hard. But the point is that there's constant pressure going inwards, and if there's a slight fault, boom, it doesn't stop. It's already pushing. It just crushes the entire thing. Now, this kind of implosion is insane, right? The water is moving so fast. These people would have been torn to shreds immediately. The heat inside of there from the air being compressed, because the air would have been essentially, right, the air is under sort of normal-ish pressure because the hull is sort of protecting it from the pressure of the water. But all of that water pressure on the air makes it compress really, really quickly. And so it's there's almost a sort of really, really sudden rise in heat. So they wouldn't have felt anything. This happened so quickly that they couldn't have felt anything. They wouldn't have really known that it died. It's like if the sort of, let's say, the sun exploded, right? We wouldn't know that it had happened until 8 minutes after it happened. But by the time that's happened, it's like instant death. Not even enough to know that you're dying. And again, as I said, there's an incredible amount of heat sort of released from the compression of that air. So they would have just been completely shredded. Think about a bomb, right? A bomb, pressure wave outwards. An explosion is a pressure wave outwards, right? And if you get caught up in that pressure wave, you can be torn to shreds, or you could be hit by shrapnel that's being carried by that pressure wave, or you can become shrapnel that's being carried by the pressure wave because it rips you apart and continues pushing you outwards. It's kind of similar, except it's going in it's going inwards, right? So they're just immediately, entirely just gone. Nothing is going to be left there. They are like disintegrated, atomized. These guys, there's no bodies, right? We're not looking for corpses. There's nothing. There's maybe if you've got like, I don't know, a gold filling or a wedding ring or something, that might survive it. Some like metal object, some really sturdy, but they're nothing, right? Like that is an incredible like force. It's an incredible amount of pressure, just immediately crushing from every angle. And there would also then be apparently some kind of, I think, explosion due to the sort of, how do I put this? The sort of outside of like some other parts of the submersible kind of like being torn apart and exploding. So the implosion could then trigger like a slight explosion, which would blow sort of like all of the debris all over the shop. But yes, I mean, the people, I mean, there are obviously 5 people that died here. One of them was 19 and only went because his dad wanted him to go and it was Father's Day, which is really bloody sad, right? I mean, Stockton Rush, dude, like the man basically died by his own hand, by his own sort of negligence. He lost his life, but also took the lives of others. And the teenager, that is absolutely tragic. The others that paid $250,000 and knew that it was flouting. Like you must look into this, even the slightest bit, and see that it's flaunting all sort of safety precautions. They're just casting them to the wind. It truly is just horrible. What happened? But yeah, as I said, you know, it was immediate. It was instant. There's no sort of like there. You know, people have been asking. So I think Trini asked, could they feel the pressure before it imploded? If you're feeling that you can't feel the pressure, because the hull is basically keeping it out, right? The hull is holding back all of that water away from you. So you don't have time to feel the pressure, because if you feel the pressure, you're dead. The pressure hits you faster than and destroys you faster than a signal can be sent to your brain, and your brain cannot understand it. You know what I mean?
I think it's also worth it to mention that if you somehow found yourself floating at that pressure, you also wouldn't be able to survive.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Like it's not just the imploding ship; it's that you, even if the ship wasn't there, if the ship vanished in an instant, you would also die quicker than you could possibly experience it. Now, the strangest thing about that is that there are actually animals living down there that don't die
because they're adapted for that.
They have like special proteins that hold the structure of their cells in place. Like it's very interesting.
But if you bring them up to to lower pressure, I'm pretty sure a lot of them do die,
right,
because they're adapted for that pressure. Yeah. The difference here is, I think what people don't necessarily get is that like it's not a case of you know, just there's lots of pressure like on an airplane. Like, you know, because airplanes kind of the lack of pressure, where the pressure inside the craft is air pressure inside the craft is higher than outside, right? It's not just there's a lot of pressure on you, you're being kind of squashed. The implosion is the sudden change of pressure. You've got normal-ish atmospheric pressure inside, and then 3,000 like meters of water pressure outside. And that sudden change is what causes the explosion. The implosion. The implosion is so fast it rips everything apart, all that sort of stuff, right? And as you said, if you were at that depth, you wouldn't be able to survive, but it wouldn't be for the same sort of reason. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, but it would be instant as well.
Well, I mean, if you were instantly transported there, it would be pretty. I mean, it would be pretty. It's. This is really difficult to talk about because it's becoming an imaginary thing of like, I'm just suddenly transported to the bottom there, but there'd be water display. It's difficult to like really conceptualize. But like, you know, if you think about it, if you go down that deep, you're not going to be able. Your muscles aren't going to be able to, like, you're not going to be able to expand your lungs, right? You're not going to be able to like breathe in. You're just going to have everything squashed out of you. You're going to be crushed, essentially, right? But it's not, being crushed by that kind of water pressure isn't the same as being torn apart by the implosion, because the implosion is so quick, whereas the water pressure is just kind of like, it's just trying to reach that sort of equilibrium. So no, they wouldn't have felt pressure before it imploded, because the implosion is that sudden change of pressure. And people are asking, how is it legal to send that underwater when it's clearly so risky? It's because it's well, in part because it's international waters, and part because it's not it's kind of like an exploratory, like an experimental vehicle. It's not you know, and I think similarly to how all of the Apollo spacecrafts were experimental.
Yeah.
Laws are kind of a bit funky when you get out to that sort of international, no one owns it kind of area, but also signing a bunch of different forms, like, yeah, I agree to this, I agree to that, blah, 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 all of that sort of stuff. It really shouldn't be legal. It really shouldn't have been legal. I mean, we may even find out that it was a bit dodgy, but yeah, no, I mean, who really bloody knows how they managed to get away with this? Because this is just very obvious endangerment. Someone asked, Proxima asked if they'd get dizzy, hot, or anything like that before the implosion. Again, they'd get very hot very quickly during the implosion, but beforehand, it's very much kind of like a normal to not normal. You might hear creaking, and like, oh, but then as soon as that integrity was broken, gone. People were asking if they knew they were in danger before it imploded. They likely knew that they were in danger. I heard that they dropped they dropped all of the weights and they were trying to resurface, but it's already a very shoddy craft, so you would maybe know you're in danger, but by the time that you know you're in danger, there's not enough time to do anything about it. It'd be a very short period of time, like not very, like it's not that you're gonna be sitting there for hours, being like, oh no, basically the time that it takes for you to realize that there's some structural issue is not enough time for you to get up to a point where that structural issue isn't going to be a problem. So yeah, no, I mean, they may have known there was some danger, but their final moments were very, very quick. And Rory, lovely Rory, we love Rory. It's Rory.
It's Rory.
It's Rory, yeah. Asked what part of it would have caused it, and would they have known anything or felt anything. Yeah, and again, similar sort of things. It was the hull, just structural integrity, because the hull was not meant to go down to that depth so many bloody times. It's like driving your car into a wall multiple times and thinking that it will be fine. You know what I mean? Like, you can maybe do it a couple times, but like, hold off, like maybe get a new car or like get it repaired before you keep on driving that thing. And I just want to like finally talk about a little bit about the implosion, like sort of pressure, like sort of how the effects of pressure on tension and compression. So when you've got pressure pushing outwards, right? So if you've got a spacecraft, or say, I guess maybe a tire, right? That's pressure pushing outwards. That's putting it in tension, right? So it's trying to make it. It's trying to basically make its container expand. Now, carbon fiber can be quite good at that, it being expanded, and it can resist that, right? Pretty solid, right? But compression is different, right? When you've got the high pressure on the outside, it's not the exact same thing. Or just things in reverse. Yeah. It's being compressed. It's being crushed, right? And different materials have different sort of properties. But that compression is, as far as I'm aware, is harder for the sort of carbon fiber to deal with structurally than being in tension. And yeah, it's just a genuinely horrible thing that happened. But it's very much, we as we said, we've got a whole After Dark about this, but like, much like the Titanic, whilst poor people were drowning elsewhere in the world, we had a full international sort of search for these people that we knew, I mean, not we, but that some knew were basically already dead. And it's, history kind of rhymes, doesn't it? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have gone after them. Absolutely, anyone that's in danger in the sea, we should maintain efforts to do that. But whilst migrants or refugees are drowning and being ignored, it seems a bit odd for 4 billionaires and one of their kids, or 3 billionaires, a millionaire and a kid, to be top priority when so many other people are drowning and currently dying, and that was happening before the submersible even went down. But yeah, that is it. Luke, you got anything to add?
Well, I think the last thing I wanted to add is that like this is obviously an incredibly dangerous activity taken out by some incredibly rich people. And one of the things that sort of frustrates me and makes me sad about this is, like you were saying, Corey, there was this boat at the same time with 750 migrants on it, all drowning, and we didn't really, no one wanted to do anything about it because they're not going to take ownership over those people. And when we do something incredibly dangerous like this, essentially you're, from like an insurance perspective, your activity, your like the thing you've decided to do is being underwritten by the governments of the world, right? Which is us. So like in the same way that like there's this funny statistic that's like people that jump out of aeroplanes in order to raise money for the NHS actually take more money from the NHS by the amount of times they get injured and how many times it costs, how much money it costs the NHS to fix them, than they actually raise the NHS. I think, please check that statistic, but I'm fairly certain that's true. And in the same way that, like, you know, you might get on a submersible and you might pay £200,000 to some random company and you might sign a waiver saying that you're not going to sue the company if anything happens to you. But ultimately, when something does happen to you, that company's not going to be able to get Navy ships from around the world. They're not going to be able to get like deep sea exploration craft. The amount of millions of pounds that will have been spent trying to recover these people for doing something demonstrably stupid by the other attempts that were made with similar craft, whilst 750 migrants are drowning in the sea, just makes me really quite sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes me incredibly sad when, like, you know, these people have got way more money than they could ever spend in a lifetime, and they're doing something that everyone else has to sort of pick up the pieces for when it goes wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the thing, you know, these companies are putting people at risk and relying, on the governments to bail them out.
Because they could never get an insurance policy to cover that.
No.
They could never get, like, Oceancraft or whatever it's called, OceanGate, could never go to an insurer and go, right, we want you to underwrite the possibility that our craft gets stuck 4,000 meters under the sea and you have to go and get the military to come and rescue us.
Yeah.
No insurer would ever give you a policy for that. So it falls on essentially the public. Everyone else is the military, and I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, but I'm just saying that
it absolutely should, though. Yeah, you know, you're right.
It absolutely should happen. But when it's done willingly, knowingly, and deliberately putting people at risk with loads of people telling you it's probably the wrong thing to do, I think there needs to be a little bit more thought about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're going somewhere where the pressure is 400 times higher than like sea level in a vehicle that, like, you know, really can't do that more than once, with people that you've got to pay you, and a child, like he's 19, but like a child, you know, it's just obscene. It's a flagrant display of, you know, I mean, I think this situation, as we discussed in the After Dark episode we've done on this situation really demonstrates wealth and the problems with hoarding wealth nowadays. You know, we have 5 people now dead from an obviously stupid venture that would never have happened had people not been trying to hoard and gain more wealth, and then having more money than they know what to do with, and spending one guy $500,000 for him and his son to go down and look at the Titanic on a screen in one of the most dangerous places they could be on the planet. You know, it truly is just, and all the while, you know, we have migrants drowning, and how like, I mean, how much could 4 passengers, or maybe 4 passengers, how much could the $750,000 to $1 million have helped, you know, the people that were drowning there? I mean, probably a fair bit.
Well, how much could the $750,000 plus all the money spent trying to rescue them help the 750 migrants on the boat?
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. It's
as well. Did you see Mr. Beast got invited on it?
That would have been horrible. That would have been horrible.
He tweeted like a screenshot of like him having been invited on this thing.
Deary me, Jesus.
And he said no.
Good.
Imagine how much, like, imagine what an internet news story that would have been if Mr. Beast was stuck at the bottom of the Titanic.
I'm not gonna lie, OceanGate would be in a lot more trouble right now if they'd killed Mr. Beast by accident. I'm like not about, but it's just like when you do that to someone famous, like people care more. But again, no, I mean, if you want to understand this more and want to understand how misguided and obviously ridiculous this was. Just listen to people like James Cameron, listen to other deep sea, explorers, because they knew these people, and they're feeling like a lot of them seem to be feeling quite sad about it. But like also on top of that, this was entirely avoidable, and pretty much every single person with expertise in this area was saying no, and they were ignored. And for the CEO, consequences of his actions. Did he deserve to die? Deserving to die is not a concept I really think matters or exists, right? Like he undertook these actions, he ignored all the warnings, and those were the consequences of his actions.
And he killed people.
And he killed people too, as well, which is genuinely horrible. It's ridiculous. It's horrid. And yeah, we have a much longer discussion, much more of this discussion over on our Patreon on After Dark, where we talk more about the sort of social ramifications of this, if you want to go and check that out. But yeah, I mean, one last thing to do. Do you want to do a quick fire quiz?
Oh, dun 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 dun. OceanGate edition.
Okay, rules for quick fire quiz. If I ask a question, you go answer before Luke. When did the Titanic sink?
1913.
1912. Ding ding ding, you're wrong. I hope you beat Luke. There we go. Wow, okay, that's it. I just really...
It's too bleak of an ending to care.
I know. Oh, goodness me. Anyway, that's it. Before we go, we'd like to thank all of our patrons with an extra special thank you to executive producers Denito and Glitch Rabbit. Thank you for watching. You'd find the full references to this episode down in the description. Subscribe to new episodes every Sunday. And why not leave a nice wee comment? Support the pod at patreon.com/SciGuys or fun contests at SciGuys on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and SciGuys on TikTok too. Or you can send us an email at sciguyspod@gmail.com.
That's sciguyspod@gmail.com. Sciguyspod
@gmail.com. You can follow me at NoCorey everywhere.
You can follow me at Luke Cutforth everywhere.
Oh, goodbye.
Go away.